complex. I expect there'll be questions on the back end, which we can touch on in the Q&A, but I'm also very available to talk one-on-one if you want to get into more detail or probe anything that we discuss here. So with that, just one quick point is employee stock ownership plans have been around since the 70s. They were created by Congress as a retirement benefit, as a mechanism for expanding access to equity in companies to a broader population. And as part of that, and actually, is this part visible? Should I get rid of?
Yeah, yep, you can say
it. As part of that, they also created some tax incentives to, provide business owners an incentive to look at ESOPs as an option to another mechanism, whether a third-party sale or other. And so what I like about this slide is it sort of presents visually what the different options are for an owner and what the different value levers, I'll call them, are in considering a business transfer. Obviously, if you want the most money and the fastest money, you're going to be looking at a third-party sale or an IPO if that's available to you, as as sort of on the top line. If you're a tightly held family business and you want to maintain that, and that's what's most important, what you're going to look, an interfamily sale or some estate planning mechanisms that will drive that transfer. But if there are other considerations that can come into play, other objectives that you may have, an owner may have in transferring a business, an ESOP can be a very attractive option, and in our mind, are underutilized. If you care about your employees and want to provide them a benefit, an ESOP is a very good mechanism and does a great job with that. If you care about keeping a company local and part of the community, an ESOP serves that very well. If you haven't laid out your succession planning strategy and you want time to do it without losing control to a minority owner or a PE firm, an ESOP can serve that very well. It's not the best at maintaining, family held control, but it does a good job of that, and actually it's family, but also does sort of friendly hands control. So it's very good with that. It will get you fair value for your company. It will not get you the most value up front. Again, it's a retirement benefit. If the ESOP overpays for the value of a company, then it erodes the benefit to the employees. And so the regulators, Department of Labor and IRS, would sort of generally frown upon that. But it can get you fair value. Was that a question there?
Yeah, let me ask you a question about value, as you're talking about value. So often one of the things that we always say in the show is that really every 18 months, every company should really get an independent evaluation of their business to understand what the real value. Can you do a valuation, an ESOP valuation as prior to doing that? Can you have someone, do you have the expertise to go to a company and say, if you did an ESOP, this is what you could expect?
Yes, we can do a spin through financials with just an NDA, and you'll get a decent idea of what might be possible. If there, next step is we actually do what's called a feasibility study, which gets into the valuation based on projections and in the historical financials, and you can understand the optionality. ESOPs are very flexible, and so you can, which you'll see in a little bit, and so that we actually work through the optionality to see how things work best for the owner.
Great. Okay, great.
And the point out, just one other point related to that whole, you're not going to get the full the most value, but because of some of the tax advantages that ESOPs are incented by, you can actually do better with a sale to an ESOP, even if you would potentially have gotten a premium in a third-party sale. Again, the government is incenting this as a mechanism to try and expand broader wealth.
Great.
So just quickly going to how this works, the mechanics of an ESOP. So what happens is the company takes out a loan on the balance sheet. the ESOP then borrows, takes out a loan from the company, and then the ESOP uses those funds to purchase the shares from the shareholder, which then sets up the foundation for the benefit. So in one three-part transaction, the owner has gotten money off the table, and then the shares are used to set up the trust, which becomes the benefit for the employees to get broader access to equity in the company. Once that happens, annually, the company is going to make cash contributions to the ESOP. The ESOP will make a loan payment internal to the company, which is the mechanism that releases the shares from a pro rata amount from the suspense account to the participant accounts, and then the company makes the loan payment on the debt. So as you are paying down the debt, the ESOP shares continue to expand and get released into the trust and participant accounts. Now, what does that mean from a finance and tax consideration standpoint? As mentioned, in ESOP is a qualified employee retirement benefit, and based on total comp. The point that makes it a business transition mechanism is that it's the only such benefit that you can actually borrow money to do, which is why the company will take out the loan, and that's what the mechanism that gets the money to the owner for their shares. Benefits that come in, again, highly tax incented. Most of you are probably aware, if you sell your house and you move those proceeds to another property, you defer the capital gains on that house. An ESOP has similar treatment. Section 1042 of the tax code allows that if you sell your corporation, provided it's a C-Corp, to an ESOP, you can defer the gains on that business, on that sale, until stepped up at death. This becomes a very compelling mechanism for estate planning and tax planning, because especially in many states, including New York and New Jersey, follow that federal federal policy, and so it can become a huge mechanism for deferring the capital gains on that business. You just have to buy qualified replacement property, which is debt or equity in a U.S.-based corporation.
Chris, let me go back, and then I always like to ask the questions because I know some people may be confused. And so ESOP, now I thought it was an employee stock ownership plan.
Correct.
And so, but the stock ownership, and so given that name, it says the employees own stock in the company is what. So explain that. Was that because a lot of people think that that's the way it works. It's not a retirement. Talk a little bit about that if you would.
So the employees are actually beneficial owners. They are not like the true owner of the company. Is the trust. So the trustee is the person who owns it, negotiates with the owner in terms of getting to a final price, all that kind of thing. But the employees are beneficial owners in that they get access to the equity via the shares in that ESOP trust account. Right. When they retire, those will get distributed to them in the form of cash payouts, much like you would a 401k. If someone leaves the company, then typically there'll be provisions that those shares will be rolled into something like an IRA that is qualified so that it's continue as a retirement benefit. So they don't control the company. The trustee is technically the owner, but he doesn't care about how the company operates. It's more about are they abiding by the terms of the trust?
Right.
That help? That makes sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay, so that's a big benefit potentially for the owner in terms of the capital gains deferral. Another benefit as a C-Corp that can be attributed, a bank loan, typically you're only able to deduct the interest payments. The payments that the distribution payments that the company makes annually for an ESOP are deductible because you're making payments for a retirement benefit. So from a cash flow standpoint, it can be very beneficial because you're getting a large deduction on the principal aspect. So the other benefit that can come into play if you choose to be an SCorp
Mhm.
and you have to make a choice at the time of the sale. If you want to do an ESOP transition as an S-Corp, then, sorry, that I'm trying to get rid of that thing up top, but just leave that.
Right over it.
Is that bother that if it's not bothering anybody? But if you do it as an S-Corp, then you can ostensibly operate as a tax-free entity. You all probably know that as an S-Corp is obligated to make cash distributions to their shareholders for tax obligations. An ESOP is eligible for those distributions as well, but they don't have to pay taxes. Again, one of the incentives from Congress. So again, it can become incredibly beneficial from a cash flow in terms of operations. Now, again, you have to make a choice. Do you want the 1042 deferral up, at the conversion time, or do you want the tax-free operation? Typically, if someone does the 1042 deferral 5 years down the road when they're eligible to be able to switch back to an S, they will do so just because that's such a compelling benefit. Again, they're very flexible, so you can do it a full ESOP for the whole company. You can do it partial. You can do it multi-stage where you're saying, I'm going to do 40% now with the intent, 40% as a C Corp with the intent of going down the road for further, and then do the second stage as an S, all that kind of stuff.
So there are a couple of questions in the chat. So
oh, sure.
What size assets is the best time to set up an ESOP? Should the company invest in the employees? Do you see that, chat?
I do not see it. Okay. But what is, so what size asset are you talking about, like in terms of what's the value of the company? What kind of?
Yeah, well, or how big a company? I think what they're saying is, how big a company should you be, and
you need about $1 million in EBITDA is what you need if you're going to do an ESOP. Otherwise, financially, it's just not worth the investment.
Right.
So you're talking, and that usually gets you to about a $4.5–5 million valuation, depend on industry. If you're doing it as an S corporation, because of some regulatory guidelines in terms of everybody participating, you generally need 20 to 25 employees. You can be slightly smaller as a C Corp, but so you're talking in that ballpark, and then anywhere upwards of that is fine. We focus on the middle market, and so our wheelhouse is sort of in that 5 to maybe 40 range, but we do have outliers higher. But that's generally the mid-market range that we work in.
And another question: upon retirement or separation of service of employees, can it be mandated that shares are sold back to the company rather than rolled to an IRA?
It depends on the provisions. Generally, it's usually mandated that they come back at some point. It doesn't have to happen immediately. Part of this is you need repurchase obligations, much like a public company would buy back stock and shares, because they will want shares available for future employees. If they get held in too small pair of hands, from long-term employees, then it erodes the benefit to the next generation.
And I assume there's another question about, I assume this is just available for-profits, not for nonprofits.
Correct. This is not, this is for privately held companies that, and typically not done for public. There are some public, but not in the mid-market sense.
Okay, great.
Okay.
You have another slide, or?
I have two more very quick slides.
Great.
So just in terms of what does this mean in terms of benefits to the company, and then I have one for the employees. ESOP companies tend to outperform their peer group. Just empirically, productivity improves 4 to 5% on average in the first year. Over a 10-year horizon, you have 25% higher job growth. Your return on assets is 2.7% higher, and sales grows by 2.3 to 2.4%. In my mind, there's reasons that, sort of logically why that might be. Two things: you're making a retirement benefit, a benefit that invests the leadership and the employees in the company because they now share in the upside. It also is a retention strategy, which you retain your talent. You have those tax benefits that I mentioned from a cash flow perspective. So, it can help with the operations. And then the last thing is you're also starting with a strong foundation generally. Again, it's a retirement benefit. The company has to have reasonable expectations of growth, because the whole point of this is that you want the value of the company to grow so that the employees benefit in greater access to equity and wealth. So, to me, logically, it flows that they might outperform their peer group. Last slide is, just sort of some benefits to the employees. ESOP companies are 25% more likely to stay in business, and 4 times less likely to lay off employees during downtimes. This has been totally borne out during the pandemic. ESOP companies have stayed in business at a higher rate than the broader population. The lower left one is one that just totally stands out to me, and it basically says ESOPs are doing what they were intended for. Employees at ESOP companies have 2.5 times the value in their retirement accounts than non-ESOP companies. Again, the whole point of it was access to equity, greater access to wealth. And the other point is 5 to 12% more in wages, again, outperforming their peer group. So some of that gets passed on to the employees. So I know that was a quick run through, but that's what I have, and I'm ready for more questions.
Yeah. How do they get in touch with you? So there's the slide, right, 201-857-6775.
And my cell is probably the best one. That's probably the best way to get hold of me, or via email.
Perfect. Chris, this is great. When we wanted to give people a taste of this, because so many folks are looking to possibly new ways to sell, valuation, and other things. So we may have you back on this, but they're really, really great job.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the time. It's nice to get in front of this group. Want me to stop sharing, or?
Yeah, if you can stop sharing, then we'll talk. Have a conversation with Michele Hart. Michele Hart, who's been at one of our sessions prior to the pandemic, and so we're happy to have her back. Deals with a lot of family law and divorce, and we're going to talk about some of the ways to deal with family business conflict, and family issues. So Michele, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Dale. And it's really my pleasure to be able to have this opportunity to share with everyone today. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michele Hart. I've been practicing law for about 28 years now, and for the most part of that has been strictly family law. And I'm also trained as a mediator in collaborative practice. Basically, the focus for us is really on reaching agreements and on transforming, rather than resolving conflict, we're transforming conflict in a way that leads to greater understanding on both sides, like where you have a husband and wife and they have to co-parent their kids together. It's super important that they get on the same page. So really everything is geared toward reaching that agreement. So I find that knowing these conflict resolution skills it's such a crucial life skill, ironically. And on the other side of that, it's just not taught in any school, or in the lower grades, or it's just not a taught skill. It's not even taught, it's not really taught at home. Nobody really knows what it is, but yet it's so important. But when we can accept that conflict is a way of life, we can then sort of lean into managing it, or as I like to say, transforming it as a way to a deeper understanding and a way that brings us closer into our most important relationships, whether they're related to work, business, family, personal. It really transcends all. And generally speaking, conflict happens when there's a clash of differing perspectives and accompanied by strong emotions, because we all.
Oh, you froze there, Michele. Hopefully you'll come back. And so Michele's dealing with a lot. What happens is family businesses have a lot of conflict.
You hear me?
Oh yeah,
Should I sign back in?
You froze for a bit. Yeah, if you're still frozen.
Can you hear me? Is it back?
Yeah, you're back now. Yeah, let's see.
Is it back?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's still slow. Still a little slow.
Back? Okay, that's weird.
Yeah, it does it sometimes. Did you want to go out and come back in?
Oh, no. Sorry?
Yeah, did you want to go out and then come back in? Sometimes that helps.
I can do that. All right, let me try that. I'm so weird. Okay, try that.
And then what we'll do is maybe we'll have Josefina go, for a few minutes, and then we'll finish up with you. But yeah, this happens. The other day, my computer died, and so I was in the midst of this and had to go to my phone and so on. So Josefina, who is an expert witness, has financial background. Did you want to kick it off, and then we'll get Michele at the end?
Sure. Share my screen here. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Dale, for the opportunity to speak in front of this group today. My name is Josefina Tranfa-Abboud. I am an economist. I have a PhD in economics, and I'm also a certified fraud examiner and a master analyst in financial forensics. I am the owner, president, and chief economist of Analytical Associates. We are located in Morristown. Dale, let me stop here. Do you want to get back to Michele? Do you want me to continue, or?
Michele, did you want to continue, or you want to do it at the end, or what?
Whatever works for you, I'm good with.
All right, good. I know you're flexible. We'll go through Josefina, and then we'll come back to you, and you can close us out.
Okay, very good. So our offices are in Morristown.
Sounds good, Dale. Sure.
Okay, very good. I have been in practice in the space of litigation as an economist for now more than 22 years. I am retained as an expert witness in legal disputes by counsel representing various businesses. I do work for plaintiffs and defendants. The majority of the work that I perform is retained on the side of the defense. I testify in court sometimes. We handle a large volume of cases every year. But the first thing that I would say about that is that the vast majority of cases do reach a settlement. And what I am going to be touching on today is on the effects of litigation on business and business owners, and with the perspective from the economist rather than from the legal perspective. The first thing that I will say as we get into this conversation is that litigation has an impact on business that will affect the business owners, and that effect on the business owners will return and impact the business. I also want to touch on what the sources of litigation may be, and litigation may be a claim that is brought by your business or a claim that is brought against your business. And those claims can be brought about by vendors, by customers, by employees, former employees, job applicants, and as other parties consider even potential whistleblowers. And really, any party that is not associated with the business can actually find a reason to establish a claim that would affect not only the financial side of the business, but also the logistics of its operations and absorb time. So this is a very, very important topic, I feel, and it is a very broad one. So I am just going to touch on a few things today, and I'm going to focus on just those elements. But this, I just want to make sure that I convey the message that this is a much, much broader conversation. But the first point that I want to touch on, other than what I just spoke about, is the cost associated with litigation. There is a financial cost and there is an opportunity cost. The financial costs have to do with exactly the amounts of money that are dispersed for various elements that are associated with an invoice, the legal representation, the experts that are retained for any particular claim, both on the side of the plaintiffs and on the defense side, which is typically the corporations, businesses. Experts of various kinds may apply to any particular kind of claim and lawsuit. There may be insurance policies that are set in place to provide coverage for the likelihood of litigation in various spaces. Workers' comp is one of them, employment practices, liability insurance, and other types of insurance policies. And the economic damages. Economic damages are the element of litigation that I deal with as an expert. I am retained by attorneys and large and small law firms to provide analyses of economic damages, which is only one component of the financial costs associated with a litigation. And those economic damages result either in an award by a jury when a case goes to trial and a jury does give a verdict, or a settlement, which is an agreement that the parties reach privately that may happen before trial. It may happen during trial. I have literally been in court and about to step into the courtroom and onto the witness stand, and I have been told, thank you for your time today. The parties have reached an agreement and your testimony will not be necessary today. That has happened a number of times. So it could be either a case that goes to trial or during the trial. The opportunity cost, however, has a different dimension that impacts businesses, and it can be a significant impact. Is the business owner's time? It is the time that is dedicated to dealing with the litigation, logistics, and dynamics by other personnel. And I think that is a very, very important question for business owners to ask, whether we know the value, which is not the financial cost, the value of the time of each of the individuals involved in the business. Providing the elements and participating and playing a role in the resolution of a litigation requires time. And the value of each employee or job classification should be measured, can be measured by what is their contribution to profitability. And in terms of, instead of dedicating the time to this litigation, what the individual could be doing, they could be to the benefit of the business. And I just want to leave that question for everyone to ponder on and to think about whether we really track as business owners the time that is dedicated to litigation. I will have to say that as an economic damages expert, as an economist, and as an expert witness, I see that quite often. Then I would like to discuss two of the main areas of the work that we do. We handle various numbers of cases that involve employment disputes and a large number of cases that involve bodily injury and wrongful death. There is another area of practice for our group. We are a group of 4 professionals at the moment. We also handle matters involving commercial damages. I'm leaving that to subject of probably a future discussion. Employment disputes, I just want to give you a couple of examples of where these disputes can come from. They can come from claims of wrongful termination, failure to hire, whether someone was channeled into a particular job that had less or different settings of growth opportunities, discriminations in pay, in promotions, and there's a wide range of claims that can occur. And for example, one of the recent developments that we have seen are the claims related to COVID-19. There have been a number of reductions in force as a result of the lockdowns, and questions may arise as to who was the one who was furloughed, who was rehired. Is the business complying with all of the federal and state laws and guidance related to COVID-19? And all of those and many more can bring about claims of related to employment. Another one that is really important is marked here as overtime. The Wage and Hour Division of the Department of Labor has significant regulations as to how to measure overtime and how that is to be paid. And those are typically class action lawsuits, and they can involve a large dollar sign. the range of claims that we have seen in our practice over the last, I would say, 5 years range, and this is the claim that is the demand for economic damages presented by the plaintiff side, ranges from 2 million to 26 million, with a more frequent range for that demand of damages to be between 2 and 8 million, which are big numbers. On the side of bodily injury and wrongful death, there are various types of claims. There are product liability claims, which is a product that malfunctioned, a biotech device, a medical device that was unused properly. There are injured customers, there are on-the-job accidents. There are medical malpractice claims for those business owners who are in the health space. Some interesting cases that we have seen over the years include allergic reactions to a food ingredient that affected a customer that was dining at a restaurant, and that food ingredient was requested to be excluded from the food that the customer ordered. There are also claims that are coming up resulting from COVID-19, people who had to return to work and then became ill and were injured. And the demand for damages, the range that we've seen is between 1 million to 210 million. Yep, that's not a typo. 210 million is the highest demand that we have seen on bodily injury. The more frequent number is between 4.5 and 15 million is what we see. So more on what is the role of an economist on this, and what is entailed in all considerations related to economic damages, is really that the effectiveness of the resolution depends on the quality of the data. And I think that that applies with other elements of a legal dispute. The quality of the information counsel might have, the quality of the discussions, the reliability, and how scrutinized the information has been really plays a significant role into a successful resolution of the claim. And from the perspective of economic damages, that is no different. The availability of data, the accuracy of the data, whether the data is scrutinized internally or by an outside expert, is really, really important. And when an expert on economic damages or counsel may say, well, we need this documentation, and the documentation is not complete or is not accurate, it will slow down the process. And the cost, that opportunity cost that I mentioned earlier, would be larger because there will be more time required in making sure that the data and information is really at the level of quality that it should be in order to be an effective tool in resolving a claim. And it is also important to think about whether the same data that is being requested, the same documentation, the same information has been used for other purposes, such as a business valuation for a shareholder dissolution or a marital dissolution that involves business somehow, or a business valuation for the determination of the value of shares of each owner. And the big question to ask on the financial and employment data, and is the best advice that I could give to any business owners, and is to always to think in terms of having to defend the validity and be able to corroborate the accuracy of the data as if that data was going to be presented for cross-examination tomorrow. Thinking even if there is no litigation ongoing, all data related to the business and all information related to the business, logs related to an employee's performance, logs related to expenses, that information is scrutinized and questioned so to improve its quality and assure that the accuracy is available.
Josefina, that's so really collecting data is so critically important before anything's filed, to make sure that you collect that. So I want to make sure that we have some time for Michele. So do you have any additional advice for the small businesses? I mean, you're an expert on seeing what happens when they don't do the right thing. Any additional advice, and then we'll go over to Michele?
Yes, and actually on this section that is titled analysis, the advice is precisely to ensure that the information is reliable. So for example, if you have performance evaluations that are done on employees, make sure that those are accurate. It is very hard typically for a supervisor to say something negative necessarily about an employee, and then problems escalate, and there is no log or proof that there was a performance issue. And as the time goes by, a separation discussion ensues. And then the information that led to that separation discussion is not really all that reliable. It's really based on memory, recollection. And there was not an in-depth review of what really, or an in-depth log of what was really happening throughout time. And the same applies, for example, when a business is looking at bringing back employees that were furloughed due to COVID-19, for example, or a battery of applicants for a particular position in the company and how that selection is taking place, and what the rules and the parameters are for those selections is really key to be able to minimize the likelihood of a claim that someone was terminated due to reasons other than performance, that someone was not brought back from the crew of people that were furloughed post-COVID-19 and reopening for particular reasons other than their performance. And when it comes to the financial data, tax returns, in anything that has to do with payments of taxes and payment of employees and the record keeping on overtime is really, really key. So that is really the best advice that I can give to business owners, is to really gather that data, scrutinize it, and sometimes many businesses consult with experts precisely to do that sort of audit job, to evaluate, well, if a problem arises, would this data be good enough? And the last point that I wanted to make is just on monetary damages. This is data that was extracted from Westlaw. And I just wanted to tie this to the numbers in economic damages that I mentioned before. I'm not going to touch on this too much, but the amount of claims, the jury awards on claims is typically lower than the number that is being claimed on damages. And I will stop there and that was really the last point that I wanted to make.
Well, this is great, and they, you can see they can reach you there on 975-902722. But litigation is unfortunately becoming a bigger and bigger part of business. So this is great advice. So we'll come back to Michele if you could stop sharing.
Stop share.
Excellent information. So Michele, sorry, why don't we come back to you in the last few minutes?
Okay, thanks, Dale. I appreciate it. Just trying to figure out where I left off. I believe what we had said was that, conflict resolution is such an important skill. It's just not really taught anywhere. And basically, it generally happens when there's been a clash, differing perspectives accompanied by powerful emotions. And generally, conflict results from either lack of communication or poor communication, meaning like something that we were trying to say, we didn't really effectively get across. And with many of us working from home this past year, it becomes a little bit more, a lot more complicated in real life. Like with so many people, employees out of sight, we're sticking more and more with email and text communication, which for the most part, things get lost in translation and people don't can't really see the, meanings get lost and misinterpreted very easily than with regard to face-to-face. I'm much of a proponent of face-to-face. I think that with body language being most of communication, I think that when you're trying to do text and email, that's got its own sort of purpose and not really for this like resolving conflict. But when we are mostly virtual, like these days, a lot of conflict can just simply flow by unnoticed or unavoided until eventually it might become unmanageable. When we're dealing with people that we see every day and that our success in our business and our work is really predicated on having successful relationships, it's really important to know that it's the way that we handle conflict determines the success of these relationships. And generally people deal with conflict in one of two major ways. One is we avoid, and to avoid, we push aside really detrimental, harmful emotions like anger and hurt, resentment. We inwardly seethe and maybe bring home these problems to our spouse and our kids. And the longer it goes on, the harder it is to get back on track. It ultimately lead to like a complete breakdown in the relationship. We don't address it right away. The other common way, or the other general way we deal with conflict, is we just like run right in. We charge like bulls and we just explode our emotional reaction all over the other person, which never ends well. So again, it can, depending on the language you use and the way you're handling it, you need to, basically the key is you need to learn to manage your emotions. Starting with, if there's a conflict that arises right away and you're aware of it, just deal with it. Know that, especially if it's your coworker and your family member, your business partner, just deal with it right away and have that intent to resolve it. Because really, if you look at it as an opportunity to gain understanding and where that person is coming from and an intention to deepen and improve the relationship, that'll really affect the outcome. And also in the remote working space, it's just generally harder to build trust, which is so essential to resolving conflict. So what we can do when we deal with conflict, and we're talking about virtual space, whether it's virtual and even if it's not virtual, what we can do is, like I was saying, to effectively manage our emotions and learn how to do that successfully. Again, this isn't taught anywhere, so it's really just important to get this. Starting with your intention. So when you intend for a positive outcome, that goes a long way. You start with suspending all judgment about the other person you're about to approach. And you got to know that chances are you know nothing about why this person is acting a particular way. They could be stressed. They could have had a fight with their spouse. They could just be having a bad day. There's a lot you're just not going to know. So you don't assume that you know. A lot of times we're saying, oh, they're just lazy. They're just selfish. How dare they? That's just a sliver of what's really going on with the other person. The other important thing is to just plan your timing. Make sure the other person's attentive. They're not like lost in something. They're not dealing with a personal crisis. You've eaten, one of my things is if I'm like, it's about lunchtime and I know nothing productive or good is going to come about when I'm in a hangry mode. It's just not happening. So you just got to, plan your timing around things that are going to be effective and get clear on what you really want the outcome to be. You may want to connect with your values. What's really important to me? Is it my relationships? Is it community? Is it being courageous? Really sort of connect with that. And think, if you start to think, well, what, I really want to win, I might want to win, or I might think I might want to win this, or, be right. But what I really want is to come some sort of agreement that works for both of us, because that's what's going to be best. And then match what you do next to that intention. The other thing is to really carefully weigh what you say. And this is where communication gets really tricky and it's kind of an art form, because you got a lot of things going on. You got to think about what you want to convey and what you want to say and how it's going to land with the other person. Like it's really going on at the same time.
Well, Michele, on that note, Michele, let me ask you on that note. So we're virtual. You deal with all sorts of conflict, family. So do you find that, because that virtual conversation, we know that texting can cause problems, but are you finding they're more virtual conversation problems than there are face-to-face?
Absolutely. Actually, yeah, I meant to say that body language, which is literally over 70% of communication, gets lost.
Right.
You see, like this is like glitching out here, you know?
Right, exactly, yeah.
I don't like it. I think you get Zoom fatigue and you just really lose that face-to-face. I think no matter what you do or what you try to do, it's always going to go back to your in-person communication is going to be
So
bring about the most.
are you saying, Michele, so you're at work and there's a conflict, it's better to kind of sit down face-to-face and just have a conversation about it, not a text, not an email, not a virtual, but really sit face-to-face to really deal with that issue?
Absolutely. For the best chances of success. I mean, you can do it other ways. I don't think you're going to get that kind of success with those other ways.
So let me bring some. The reason that we had this, so I've seen situations where they didn't do what Michele said. They're in conflict. They end up going to court and fighting in court with Josefina, and then they have to sell the company, so that they use the ESOP. So so it all ties together, and so the conflict is very real. One of the other issues we're seeing is that young people, the idea of longevity is I have a 16-year-old, is a different concept. They think longevity is a year, so the idea of carrying on a 100-year-old family business. And so you're having more and more conflict within families, which unfortunately oftentimes does end up in court and leads to the sale of the company. So the advice is really, really good. Any other good tidbits, Michele, in the last few minutes? We have about 6 minutes.
Yes. Think about before you respond. So first key thing too is also listen to the other person and listen from a place of how they're seeing things. Now this requires a lot of, really, like if you feel yourself starting to get emotional, and I tell this to clients and I tell this to people all the time that I'm coaching or mediating, just really notice when your temperature starts to rise and just take that beat of a breath and just to say, get yourself recentered again before you even open your mouth to respond, because what's going to come next is either going to, bring success or not in that one moment. So if you feel the urge to defend yourself, just take that breath, refocus back on your intention. Again, picture how the other person's seeing this and take responsibility. Conflict is not just about one person. We all know that. We know it, but it's hard to do it in practice. But if you can show the other person, say, you know what, I acknowledge the impact that what I said or what has happened, the impact on you. If you can express with compassion the impact that something had on another, you're going to get that trust right away. You're just going to get that trust. That's probably the most powerful thing. Right. And it's really, you got to think about it, like, it's not just like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. Like, no, that's not going to go anywhere. That doesn't do anything. It's like, I didn't pick up the phone to acknowledge the part that you had in this project, because I really feel, and I know you worked hard, and then to just, not having thanked you in a way that you deserve to be thanked. And I understand how that must have felt for you. That would just go a long way. So it's about taking responsibility and getting support. Like if you need help, all leaders need confidence in the skills in conflict resolution. So whether it's going to, taking ongoing trainings or classes or online classes to continue these skills. I mean, I read a lot. I read a ton of stuff. I'm a big reader and I practice, like my husband will tell you he's my biggest guinea pig on this stuff, but, or bring in a mediator, bring in a skill. I mean, I do mediations all the time. Bring in a skilled mediator who can maybe sort of direct you back in the right place when you're having problems, because really it's not even about, like I said at the beginning, managing or coping or handling conflict. It's about transforming the way you respond and transforming conflict into something that leads to a greater understanding for a more successful, deeper connection down the road with somebody who's like, an important relationship in business. That's true in anything, home.
Michele, so one of the things that we're finding as we work, especially with family businesses, is they won't go to a psychologist. They're two brothers that have totally different personalities, but they're co-owners of a company and they just don't get along. They don't want to go to psychologists because they're not crazy. They don't want to go to mediators because they're not suing each other. There almost needs to be a middle ground and I don't know if you do that. And terminology is very important. A different term. You're not a counselor, but
Coach.
I don't know.
Coach.
But yeah, a coach, really. Yeah,
I coach
really
people all the time. Yes, like I'll have guys call me.
Yeah.
All that. Yeah, it's very helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's it, because I'm telling you, I would say at least 50% of the businesses that I know that the brothers or sisters are running it, they need a coach. They need someone to go between, because they often, there's one situation where the person, they said, don't call me, just send me an email. They don't even, the brothers don't even want to talk. And it happens all the time.
Avoiding,
so
that's
really
the avoiding. But just back to your point, a mediator is not just for when you're suing. Mediator is a mediator. That will actually a mediation is a very powerful way to have the parties feel heard, because the source of most, if not all, conflict isn't somebody's not getting heard or doesn't feel heard. We all need to be heard. We all need to be understood. So a mediator, like this is one thing that I help people do, is just bring them to where they can hear each other. Even if I'm the mediator and I'm saying, I hear you, I see you, I hear what you're saying. Then they just it means a lot.
And Dale, we see that in our side too. No, I was going to say, we see that in our side too. And like you said, family business, a lot of it with the next generation down that may not want to be involved or may want to be involved differentially, and creates conflict. So, you're spot on with your comment there.
Is key, and it also affects what potential situations can arise. And as I'm hearing Michele, I'm thinking, I didn't include this in the presentation, but think about those claims about hostile work environment. Mm-hmm. When someone was not listened to, or someone was told a word that they didn't necessarily appreciate, mm-hmm. all of these conflicts can arise. And maybe the person then storms out the door and falls down the steps. So then you have an employment situation and an injury situation.
Right.
They can really feed into all of the aspects of the business. And the person happens to be a very key player in the business, maybe a family member. There are cross-generational litigations that are brought about. There are family members that sue each other. There are people that do not want to mediate anything. And then all of those tags into all of the issues of potential legal situations that may arise from one conversation that could have been fixed by bringing the people together on resolving that minor conflict.
Absolutely.
And avoiding it to escalate. And that is the best advice that someone can give to an HR department, is to really work towards those resolutions and to really look for the external resources that would bring that conversation to its
Absolutely. I mean, when you compound that, like just taking that one example and compounding it over the entire world and everything plus everything I see every day, mm-hmm. so much time and money is wasted, lost, up in smoke, just as a result of unresolved conflict or people just not knowing what to do. It costs a ton of money. I can't even begin to fathom.
Dale, looks like we got our next hour, Dale.
We're at time. But again, we wanted to give the audience a taste. This is a holiday Friday, and I know some people are busy, but this is a taste. It's recorded. You all did a great job. This really, really, really good information and really interesting stuff. And so we'll have you back. But I just want to thank. We're after one. We try to end closely at one. But again, thank the panelists. I want to thank all of those who sat through this session. And we will see you in 2 weeks. We're not going to be here next week, but we'll be here the week after. So thanks again for watching our family Zoom at noon, our Friday Zoom at noon. So take care.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great holiday weekend.
Have a great holiday and weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.